Hello everyone, long time no see. I am the Saxy Gamer, and today I'd like to have a discussion about tech, because tech has been really what I've been interested in for the past good while now. It's what I like to talk about with my friends, and I figured I'd start sharing some of my thoughts on the channel. So what I'd like to talk about today is some news from Computex, because obviously Computex has been going on, and I'd like to talk about the Intel X series lineup, because I feel as though what Intel is doing right now is flawed to such a degree that it needs to be called out. And Linus Tech recently did a video calling them out on this, and he obviously has a lot more power than I ever will, but I figured I'd share my 2 cents on it anyways. So let's get right into things. So naturally, the first thing about the X series lineup would be to ask, what is the X series lineup? And for those of you who may be out of the loop, Intel recently announced their X series lineup, which is their new lineup of processors. That is their it's not their Extreme series, it's just X. It's kind of like the Titan X little p and the Titan X big P, but they're just the Titan X. But this is like the Intel X series, but it's not the Extreme series, so it's a naming mess, as a lot of tech companies are falling into these days. But anyways, at the base of this series, we have the i5-7640X, which has a base clock of 4 GHz, and it is a 4-core, 4-thread processor, and 16 PCIe lanes, and supports 2 channels of memory with a TDP of 112 watts. And some of you may be wondering, well, that sounds very similar to the good old 7600K. And, well, it pretty much is the 7600K, except it's got 200 megahertz higher base clock and about 20 watt higher TDP. And the other difference is that all of these processors run on socket 2066. So, obviously, you know, with this bottom of the line one, it's a bit strange already. And then at the top of this lineup, we have the i9. Ooh, they added a 9 now. It's no longer 7, it's 9. 7980XE. So they also added an E to only the top one. Maybe this one's the extreme one. But it's an 18-core, 36-thread processor, retailing for $2,000. And they have released no specs about it, which is kind of fishy, but more on that later. So, anyways, as you can see, I'll put up the chart of all the processors here, but I think that this is trying to be some sort of comeback to Ryzen, because in this this series they have a 6-core 12-thread, and they have an 8-core 16-thread and a 10-core 20-thread that they've already announced. With those, the 6-core processor is only $389, which is like a bargain whenever you're talking about Intel processors. So obviously they're trying to compete with Ryzen for these, and that's okay, except the only thing is they're not really they're not making the best thing that they can. They're just making something that will quote-unquote beat Ryzen, and they're taking the minimal effort they can to edge out Ryzen, so that way they're like, oh, we're Intel, we are the best. And it only gets worse from there, because as we take a look at the top 4 processors in this lineup, from the 12-thread or the 12-core onward, you'll notice that there are no specs released for these. And, well, that's a little bit fishy. Maybe it's because of Threadripper that's, you know, going to be coming out in a little bit. And I think that Intel is going to wait and see what happens with Threadripper. They're going to see what people like about it. They're going to see what people hate about it. And then they're going to decide these top 4 processors entirely based on Threadripper. And so that way, once again, they can take the minimalistic, you know, edging out of Threadripper and being like, oh, we have the superior processors. Look at our i9 CPUs. They're the best. And it's a shady business practice, Intel. Like, it's not good. Because if you ask me, this is very similar to what Linus said, but you should do everything in your power to make the best processors you can, the cheapest you can. Because then you produce the best product. It doesn't matter if it's the best you have, then it doesn't matter if your competition's, you know, gonna beat you, because it's the best you have. There's no chance that you're gonna make it better unless you improve yourself. And if they would do that, they could make some insanely good processors with reasonable prices, but they're not. And this is kind of where the whole Ryzen thing is almost backfiring, in that it's not really creating good competition. It's just allowing Intel to still sit back, and they're like, well, I guess we're just going to do what we have to, you know, be a little bit better than Ryzen, so that way we can say that we beat them. And, yeah, that's about it. And it's just, it's not a good business practice. But it only gets worse from there, actually. So, if we take a look at the i5-7640X, you'll see it uses obviously socket LGA 2066 and supports 2 memory channels and all that, 16 PCIe lanes. Well, if you take a look at the motherboards that we're seeing at Computex, the motherboard manufacturers are making, well, they're making socket 2066 boards. Well, the only problem is there's a lot of features involved with the X299 chipset that not all the processors use. So you have some things such as with RAID arrays and control of such things, which there's also a problem because Intel is only supporting, I think it has something to do with their RAID, how they're treating RAID with M.2, with you need to have an Intel SSD, which is just garbage, which it's reminding me of Optane, but that's another talk probably for the next video. But they're making things very exclusive for no reason. So if you remember, we talked about how the i5 was pretty much the 7600K, except if you buy this i5, you're going to have to buy an LGA 2066 board, which is going to be incredibly more expensive than anything you're going to buy for LGA 1151 or whatever the socket is for the 7600K. So you're going to have to buy this really expensive motherboard that's got all these features built into it because the motherboard manufacturers are building all of the X299 chipset features into all their motherboards, but you can only use some of the features. So for instance, for the memory, the boards have 8 DIMM slots, and the i5-7640X can't use all of them. So you're literally paying for these useless features that you're never going to use. So then it arises the question, why is the i5-7640X even a thing? Because it doesn't make any sense. If the only socket you're going to be able to put it in is LGA 2066 and the only chipset you can use is X299, there's almost no reason to even buy the i5-7640X or the i7-7740X because they're just pointless. So now we can come to at least my conclusion on the X series family of processors. And there's plenty more to talk about, but there's honestly just a lot that I'm not 100% sure of about the X series family and the X99 chipset, such as a lot of the RAID features and some of the other various features, just because I haven't had the most time to read up on everything, and I'm obviously not at Computex. So please refer to Linus's video because he talks about a lot more than I ever will be able to. But if you ask me, I think that the X series is a useless and lazy generation of processors that should not exist. Because Intel is just trying to edge out AMD. They're not doing it because they want to. It feels rushed, for instance, with the lack of them even having specs for their top processors. It's like they're just like, all right, shoot, we gotta make sure that, we have something with Threadripper, except we have no idea, we have nothing planned, so let's just say that we're gonna make this thing, and then one day we're gonna make it. And it's lazy, it's rushed, it's not good. It's scummy. And I typically don't like to hate on Intel, because I will admit that, for the most part, Intel does make the best processors. However, they're not making them the best processors because they want to make the best processors. They're making the best processors because they know that they don't have to apply themselves very hard. And I really hope that AMD pushes them out of this. And one of the things I think that they could do, so that way I'm not totally hating on Intel, to make this X series a little bit more, not so terrible, is to have another chipset go with it that doesn't have all the features of X299, but has like the ones for the lower processors in the family. So that way you're not paying for things that you are literally going to be impossible to use, because that's just stupid, and that is terrible business practice, that is anti-consumer, and there's nothing about that I will ever support. And I admittedly don't own a Ryzen processor. I have a Blade Stealth, and I have an i7-6500U, so obviously I don't know the whole half of Ryzen. I would really like to, but I am poor, so I can't quite afford one. But I really hope that AMD is able to crush with Threadripper and just prove that you don't need to make things ridiculously overpriced to have them good, because rumors are that Threadripper is going to be starting at around $880 for 16-core 32 thread, I want to say, which compare that to Intel's, 16-core, 32-thread here of $1,700, and it's absurd. And I really hope that AMD keeps up their practices of being, budget-friendly, well, for the most part, budget-friendly, but still trying to crank out the most performance that they can. Because I think that it's a very good practice, and I think it helps the tech market. It helps prevent scummy people like Intel from doing this. And trust me, as I said before, I don't want to hate on Intel, because I like Intel, and I like the processor I have. I like most of their processors, but they're just not being good right now. And they really need to fix themselves. So, thank you everybody for listening. I've been the Saxy Gamer. Hopefully I'll be able to do more tech discussions like this because I quite enjoy talking about tech. It's just something that, I don't know, I never really thought to record my thoughts and post them, but I mean, I guess I'll try now. Maybe next time I'll rant about Intel Optane and how I think that that's a load of garbage as well. But thank you for watching. I've been the Saxy Gamer. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like or subscribe. If not, feel free to dislike. It doesn't matter to me. Any feedback is good feedback if you ask me. Don't tell that to Intel because they might get triggered. Thank you and goodbye.